So what we're going to talk about today is the current living situation in Clarity, and what it's used for and how to record it and when to record it. And we're going to record this so that in the future, people who are working in coordinated entry or in street outreach can view it on the LMS and review the current living situation and what it's used for. So please keep yourself muted unless you have a question. And we'll have some specific times that we're going to stop for questions during the presentation. And you can also feel free to put any questions that you have into the chat as well. So this training is for street outreach, people who work with street outreach or in the coordinated entry project. So if you don't have access to either of those project types, you will not have access to the current living situation assessment, and you won't need to use it because the only places that the current living situation is recorded in HUD standards is in those two project types. And so we're going to go over when to complete it in either of those project types, how to do it in Clarity, and how it is used, which is primarily for chronic homeless documentation. And we'll show you how to run the report for documenting chronic homeless status and the 3-year homeless history in Clarity. So as a reminder, when you log into Clarity, you will see various information. The key part is, especially for those of you who are in coordinated entry, is that if you want to, if you are at an agency and have access to coordinated entry, you want to record a current living situation in coordinated entry, you would need to switch to the coordinated entry agency in order to do so. But if you're in street outreach, you want to just leave it in your agency and record the current living situation in street outreach. You don't need to do it in both places. So to get to a client, you'll use the search, and then you'll go into the active program, which would either be coordinated entry or a street outreach program. And you want to go into that program because the living situation is a program assessment that lives inside one of those two program types. So you would go into the program and then click on assessment to view past current living situations or to record a new one. So the current living situation should be recorded in street outreach with every contact, including when the client is first enrolled in the program and when they are engaged, which may or may not be at the same time. You might enroll a client in street outreach early on and not really, and you wouldn't do a full engagement until you have enough information from them that you could complete the universal data elements and have a complete homeless history for them on their project enrollment page. And at that point, you would also fill out an engagement. And in those cases, at each of those points, at the first time you talked with them and enrolled them in the project, and then another current living situation when you engaged them. So in street outreach, the goal, in order to document somebody staying outdoors, they would need at least one contact and current living situation recorded per month, which I think is pretty common knowledge, but I want to re-emphasize it here. So that's when to do it for street outreach. In coordinated entry, a current living situation should be recorded when the client is enrolled in the program then when any coordinated entry event is recorded, so that would include crisis needs assessment, assessment for housing availability, any referral or problem solving events, all of those, at each of those points, you would record their current living situation. And so for outreach programs, obviously, so for outreach programs, you'd generally be recording current living situations of places not meant for human habitation, that's what you're documenting. For coordinated entry, the current living situations that are recorded are not documenting homeless history. They're kind of keeping track of it for the purposes of coordinated entry. So people might be, might be in shelter some of those times, might be outside some of those times, might be couch searching some of those times throughout their coordinated entry enrollment. You would also record a current living situation anytime that it actually changes that you hear about, even if it's not at the time of an event. So somebody might have been camping in the summer and might be couch surfing for a few weeks in the fall, and then might only a couple weeks later try to get a shelter referral, in which case you would record it at that shelter referral event, but you would also have recorded a living situation without a coordinated entry event when they went to start couch surfing. The current living situation is also how we currently have it set up, is the type of contact that's required in coordinated entry to keep a client open. So a current living situation in coordinated entry should be recorded at least 30 days. Are there any questions on when to record it, or the current living situation? That's pretty clear to everybody? It's quite often, but the advantage is that in Clarity, it's very, very simple to do. So the current living situation is an assessment in Clarity. It's a separate assessment from the status assessment. It used to be that in Service Point, you had to record it as with an interim. It's just a standalone assessment. So you would click start to take a new one. And if you scroll down on that program assessments page, you'll see the history of any assessments that have been taken. So in coordinated entry, that would include both current living situation and VIs right now. But in street outreach, there will just be a whole list of completed current living situation assessments in the past. The assessment only consists of date of contact and the drop-down menu of current living situations to choose from. You can put in details about the location into the location details, but you could also record them in an outreach contact service for outreach instead, in which case it would be that location information would be can be geotagged in the service. It can't be here. So I would recommend using the geolocated services if possible. But if for coordinated entry, if somebody does report they're staying outside, then the coordinated entry could put in the details about that location and let outreach know that somebody on an outreach team who also has access to coordinated entry know, and then that outreach person could go and look at the client record and see where that location is and see if they could find them. So are there any questions, or I will demonstrate live how to do it. Just a second, if there's anything more. Nope, okay. Let me just get to the right. Okay. Okay, so now I'm in the training site, and to get to a client, I would either use the client search or I could go to a recent client. And this client is active in Path Street Outreach. So I clicked on the Path program to go into it, and then over to assessment. And I can see that in the history, there was one recorded there in August. So I'll create one for this client. This is an individual assessment. I could, if this was coordinated entry and it was a family, I could do the whole family. And here are my available options for current living situation. And I can put, and that's the whole process. That's how the complete recording. Now this client has one current living situation in August and one in October. So so I'll show you next what that looks like in terms of documenting homeless history. Does anybody have any questions about the process now that you've seen it live and how to do it in the system? So Alice is asking if folks should also update the locations in the locations tab. So the locations tab is more for permanent addresses that wouldn't change. So certainly if outreach in an outreach project, if folks are outside and have an encampment, they could have an active location that is that encampment. And then if the encampment moves, or the particular client moves from that encampment to a different one, they could make the old encampment inactive and make a new one active. But I think it's probably more practical to do that with services, and we haven't really figured out how all of that's going to work in outreach yet. And the locations would also, for encampments, would also be useful if coordinated entry gets a location of an encampment that they want to share with street outreach programs. So that would be the time to do it, but you would not need to update I would not say that you need to update the location very often. That's more of an initial thing, and then you can update them as situations change. But the current living situation is usually going to be about confirming a continued living situation rather than recording a change, especially while folks are homeless. So the next part about this is that this is how to document. So the current living situations recorded in street outreach projects document street and shelter homelessness. So to get to the report of the homeless history, as documented by HMIS, you would go back to it's on the client profile screen, and then it's in client reports, which is this print button. And the report, which is a fantastic report, is this one. It's HUD-X 233, client level system use and length of time homeless. And you want to run it for a 3-year period. So you want to run it for the past 3 years to show all of the months in the past 3 years that the client could have been homeless, because that's the time frame for documenting chronic homeless status. And now the report will go up into the report queue. It'll run pretty quickly. And so, oh, okay. So this will give you the detail. So the months documented street shelter homeless will either be months where street outreach has recorded a current living situation, or that a night-by-night shelter has recorded a bed night, or that an entry-exit shelter has an enrollment, has the client with an active enrollment. So that's what it is. And if we scroll down, it will show you the detail of the history. So for this client, from going back to the beginning of the report period, which was October 2018, through until we get to April of 2020, that's unknown, because there's nothing in HMIS in Clarity that the client has reported or has been documented for that time period. And then from April 1st until this current outreach enrollment, that's what they told the outreach worker, the past outreach worker, that they were homeless during that time, and it hasn't been documented. So that they would have to find self-report or third-party documentation in order to document it. And then there is the note of the day when that actual current living situation was recorded. But then we have recorded on 9/1 a program entry into permanent housing, and that's going to overwrite any current living situations recorded in street outreach, or any shelter enrollment. So it's really important that when clients exit permanent housing, that happens promptly, because otherwise you can't start documenting a new episode until that housing has ended. Does anybody have any questions about how to run that report or what it would say? There's a little bit, I can switch to the slides. There's a little more, I put a little bit more information in about what those definitions mean. So the documented breaks also would be short-term enrollments in transitional housing or permanent supportive or permanent housing that have a move-in date. And then self-reported breaks would be times that the client has an enrollment where they reported they were coming from a hospital or from staying with friends or family or any of those other non-homeless situations at the time that they, on the day that they were enrolled in, for example, an outreach or shelter project. Does anybody have any other questions about how to use this, or when they should? You can also feel free to unmute yourself now if you have want to ask any questions. That's all of our content for today. We just wanted to make sure that we had something that was really clear about when and how to record this assessment. So if there aren't any other questions that anybody has, you can feel free to go. Thank you.
Also, friendly reminder that this video will be uploaded to the LMS. So if you have staff that couldn't make it today, just send a help desk ticket to HMIS at RIHMIS and we can assign them. Or you guys could do it yourselves as well through the course content. Thank you.